Well, good morning. We are jumping into a new series today. I'm pretty excited about it. And as you can see from your outline, we are going to be in the Book of Proverbs for the month of June. The Book of Proverbs, it's the book of wisdom, if you didn't know that. And so here's the thing. I believe that every single person in this room, if I looked you in the eye and I said, do you want to become a wiser person? I think you'd say yes. And if you don't, then you're not a wise person. Or if I asked you, how many of you years from now, looking back on the last 10, 20, 30 years, wherever you land, would want to say, I am so much wiser than I was back then? How many of you would want to be seen in your later years as a person of wisdom, a man of wisdom, a woman of wisdom? But here's the thing, and we need to clarify some terms here. I don't know if you've thought this through or not, but wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. They're not the same. Some of the smartest people on the planet, in fact, are not wise. Some of the most intelligent people you will ever meet doesn't mean that they have wisdom. Some of the smartest people that I've run across in my own life do not necessarily live and act and speak and see things in a way that is wise. And, today in our world, I think you'd all agree, we have no shortage of knowledge. We have no shortage of information. In fact, it's accessible right at our fingertips. We can go immediately and look up what any voice says about anything. We can put any question into the system and it'll spit out an answer. Education has become very free these days, by the way. You can go online and there's no shortage of educational material about any topic under the sun without even going to school for it. No matter what kind of knowledge you're looking for, you can find it. It's at your fingertips. But there's an issue, and the issue is in an age of so much information and knowledge so readily available to us, that does not necessarily mean that we have a lot of wisdom floating around these days. And so wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. Knowledge, really, if you want to define it, it's just an increase of information. It's just learning about a topic. It's understanding something better. But wisdom is actually quite different, especially if you look at it from a biblical standpoint and what the Word of God says about it. Wisdom is more related to what we do and how we respond and how we do it and who we do it with. And, vast knowledge about any topic, it's good. It's a good thing. But this original word here, if you go back to the Hebrew language that this was written in, the word for wisdom in this book, it's the word chukmah. Everybody say that. Chukmah. Yeah, don't spit on the person in front of you. But the best definition of chukmah, if you really want to boil it down and get that deep meaning from this word, it's actually practical wisdom. It's the ability to judge correctly, and not just judge a situation correctly, but actually follow through with the best course of action. So what that means is wisdom is practical. In the book of Proverbs, it's the kind of wisdom that you apply to your life and live out, and you don't just see the wise thing, but you actually choose the right course of action in whatever situation you find yourself in. It's a very practical thing. Another word that defines this original word here is the word precision. You could translate it to precision. That when you make a decision, it's precise. You know what you're doing. You know how to do it. And you're going to shoot for a certain result because of the way you're doing it. Wisdom, from a biblical sense, is very much like that. It's so different from knowledge and information. It's what to do, how to do, when to do it, all those types of practical questions. So let me give you some context on the book of Proverbs before we kind of jump into it. The Proverbs are attributed to this guy named Solomon, and he basically sets up this whole book, if you read it and kind of feel the tone of it, as if it's being communicated to you by a loving parent. So that's kind of the filter I want you to hear the book of Proverbs through as we go through it. It's as if a loving father is passing down this wisdom to you, or a loving mother is passing down this wisdom to her children. That's kind of how you can read this. And when you read it from that lens, you get a lot of really great, practical, bite-sized, shareable, put them on a Post-it note, put them on your fridge type nuggets of wisdom that you find all throughout the book of Proverbs. At times it's poetic. It uses a lot of metaphor in Proverbs. And what you'll find is it's this treasure trove of wisdom if you know how to read it right. And I was just thinking, as we head into summer, we always do something a little different in the summer where our different pastors get up and kind of rotate through, and you get to hear from more of us. And so we're going to do the Book of Proverbs this month and kind of get some wisdom out of that. And so here's what I'm going to start with today, if you want to write this down. The first thing I want you to know about wisdom is the gift of wisdom is a gift that God wants to give you. It doesn't matter who you are. Wisdom is something that he wants to give you. The question is, do you want it? The question is, are you willing to do what it takes to get it? Are you open to receiving it? Those are important questions, but it's not a question of whether or not God wants to give you wisdom. The scriptures make it very clear he wants to give you wisdom. So let me kind of get us thinking about wisdom before I jump into the Proverbs for a minute. I want you for a moment to think about the wisest person you know. Could be somebody in your current life. It could be somebody from your past who's not in your life anymore, but just think about that for a minute. Who's one of the wisest people that you know? I see a lot of nodding going on because you're immediately picturing that person as I say those words. And now, don't miss this, though. When you picture the wisest person in your life, I'm just going to throw this out there. It's usually not the most intelligent person you know. It's usually not, believe it or not. And so I want you to think about that for a minute. Think about that wise person. I was thinking about that question myself this week, and I thought back to when I was in college many years ago, and I had this one professor. And he was not necessarily the smartest professor on campus. He was not who most of the students would have called the most intelligent professor on campus. He wasn't the one with the most letters after his name or the most terminal degrees. He was not even a full-time department chair or anything like that. He was actually a part-time adjunct professor in the subject that I was studying. And every other week or so, I really connected with him well. We would go to lunch together in between classes. And every time that I sat there across the lunch table with him, I would just have this deep desire to just be with him. I just saw him as such a wise man, and it had nothing to do with what he knew up here or what he could quote or how well he could argue. It had to do with his character, his persona. Wisdom just poured out of him. It just oozed out of him. I just saw him as wisdom. He was such a wise man. There was this one moment we were having lunch, and I was in my young arrogance expressing to him an area of my life where I felt like I actually had a lot of wisdom. And without flinching, he looked me in the eye between bites and he said, "Jarrod, I have forgotten more than you've learned at this point in your life." And I was really humbled in that moment. But he was just filled with wisdom and joy and experience. But don't miss this. His wisdom was not obvious to me because of what he knew up here. It wasn't obvious to me because of his understanding of this subject or that subject. His wisdom was obvious because I could just see it pouring out of him in the way that he interacted with people, in his tone, in the way he communicated, in the way he genuinely cared about people. This is a wise man later in his years that I just was hungry to receive wisdom from. I was starving for it. And another thing, he would always, even his face. I don't know if you've seen that before. Have you ever looked on someone's face and you could tell that they just have wisdom and joy and peace in them that just goes beyond other people? I know that a lot of you in this room have this deep joy, but some of you really need to tell your face. Because nobody would know by the way that you conduct your face. But there have been multiple people in my life that just so much wisdom in them the wisest people I knew. And whenever you're with them, you just want to ask questions and you want to bring a list of questions and you want to lean in and just receive their wisdom. And by the way, humility is the first step in receiving wisdom from somebody. What I've learned in my life is there's a lot of people who know how to be mentors. There's not a lot of people who know how to be mentored. And a lot of times when somebody asks somebody to mentor them, what they mean by that is they sit across from the person and they just pour out their struggles to this mentor. They pour out their complaints and their venting and everything that's going on in their life. And then by the end of the hour, the mentor has said 2 words. That's not the posture of somebody who has coffee with somebody they want to receive wisdom from. The posture of wanting to receive wisdom is humility. It's asking questions. It's letting that person talk more than you talk, because it's not supposed to be a vent session. It's supposed to be, what can I glean from this person who has this experience and this wisdom inside of them? And I've sat with people who their wisdom and their ability to pour into good soil is just contagious. But can you be good soil? Because that's a piece of receiving wisdom from somebody who's wise, is you have to learn how to be good soil and actually receive wisdom from them, which means when you're sitting across from them, you're not making it about yourself. You're leaning in, you're listening intently, you're asking lots of questions, but making it about the wisdom that's sitting in front of me and absorbing it instead of, I just want somebody to talk to, because that's not how you get wisdom. So when we dig into Proverbs, which I hope I can really inspire you to do today, because I know some of you, even just reading at the top, you're like, oh, Proverbs, I'm going to skip this series. I'm going to walk you through some things that are just going to inspire you, I think, today, and just get you going. So here's the thing about Proverbs. I never realized until I was maybe in junior high that the majority of wisdom that all these people around me as a child growing up were sharing with me, from teachers to things I heard on the television to my parents, they weren't quoting where it was from, but all of it was coming from Proverbs. And so I would hear something like, laughter's good for the soul, or smiling is good for the soul, or something like that. And I would say, hey, that's really good. And then, science backs that up, by the way. They've studied this, that if you actually smile, even when you're not feeling like smiling inside, or you laugh, it actually does something physiologically inside of you where you actually have an experience of more joy. It makes people around you like you more, and you're more appealing to them. The smile is a big deal, even if you're not feeling it. Again, some of you need to tell your face. And so when you dig into Proverbs, you see all this wisdom that you thought came from like Thomas Edison or something, but no, it's from the Book of Proverbs. That's where it originally came from. And so it's just this powerful, powerful thing. But Proverbs is full of advice just like that one that can be applied to real life. And so in Proverbs, we find wisdom about work, we find wisdom about sex, we find wisdom about marriage and finances and all these different categories of our life. And so the most important thing I want to point out about Proverbs, and then I'm going to read you some of it, is Proverbs is really about putting God first in every area of your life. And so when you read a proverb that's about marriage, what you're going to find as you read through it is it's about putting God first in your marriage, because that's how you're going to have wisdom affect your marriage. When you read the ones about your finances, you're going to see it's about putting God first in your finances, and that's how you move into an effective way of living. And it's just fascinating when you read it through that lens. So let me read you one. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, it says this: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." Okay, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And again, that word knowledge they use here, if you go back to the original language, is not talking about information. It's talking about that practical wisdom that we're talking about. So the fear of the Lord, putting God first in every area, helps renew our minds and get us to a place where we can process all the different stuff happening in our life from a place of wisdom. So if you're taking notes, I'm going to put 3 words up on the screen here and just kind of walk you through them, because this is kind of the order that you have to go through it if you want to live a life of wisdom. The first thing I'm going to point out is that you can't actually get true wisdom unless you have God. I'm just going to put that out there. You can be very intelligent. You can be an expert on a subject. You can be very knowledgeable. People can even think you're wise, but you don't have true wisdom unless you have God first, because that's the source of true wisdom. It's the only place you can actually get the kind of wisdom we're talking about in this series. And then, if you want to have life, the kind of life we're talking about, the life that is lived effectively, the life that produces a lot of fruit, the life that makes an impact on the world around you, you have to do it through wisdom. So that's the order. First you need God, then you need his wisdom, and then you can actually live that life. And I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but another thing about the book of Proverbs is there's 31 of them. So what that means is, in the month, you can read one a day. So what a lot of people will do is they'll read one proverb a day for a whole month, and then the next month they'll read one proverb a day, and then the next month they'll read one proverb a day. And what you'll find is by the end of the year, you have read every proverb 12 times, and without even knowing it, you've just absorbed all of this wisdom from this book. It's an incredible thing. I've done it for a while. And so another tip that you can use is some people will assign the day of the month to the proverb. So today is June 2nd. So this morning you would have read Proverbs chapter 2. And then tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're going to read Proverbs chapter 3. And what I found, I don't know if you found this, I know a lot of you have because you've told me, is oftentimes when I wake up and read from the Proverbs, it'll shock me because exactly what's being shared in that chapter is something that's going on in my life that day. And that just amazes me when that happens. Some of you send me emails regularly where you say, hey, the thing that you read today, and you didn't even know this was happening in my life, is exactly what I was going through. And not only that, Jarrod, but then the next morning, I got a devotional in my inbox from somebody else unrelated to you, and it was the exact same thing. And then Wednesday night at my women's Bible study, the exact same thing was brought up again. It's almost as if God is trying to share some specific wisdom with me for my life. Yes, he can do that. And so we process through that. But there's a lot of stuff in Proverbs that's really helped me over the years stay grounded and kind of live a fruitful life. And so I'm going to share just some nuggets with you because I'm going to show you how powerful Proverbs can be. So let me take you on a quick tour of the book of Proverbs, okay? So I mentioned Proverbs chapter 1. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and it's a fool who despises wisdom and receiving instruction. So that's the word of God saying if you're somebody that does not like to receive instruction from others, then you're a fool. That's pretty convicting to me. Chapter 2 says if you cry out for insight, if you seek it like silver and gold, if you treat wisdom as a treasure that you're searching for that's hard to find, you will gain more wisdom than others. That's a powerful aspect of chapter 2. Proverbs 3 says, honor the Lord with your wealth and the first fruits of all your produce, and if you do, your barns and your vats will be full to overflowing. It's this idea of in every area of your life, but this one's talking about the area of your finances. If you put God first in that area, then there's blessing involved in that. Proverbs chapter 4 says, ponder the path of your feet, and your ways will be short. So we don't want to be people that don't make plans ever. We don't want to be people that just, walk and don't think about where we're going. We want to actually pay attention to the direction we're walking and where our feet are stepping and how we're walking, because then and only then will our path be the shortest distance to the destination. Chapter 5 says, enjoy the wife of your youth. May her breasts satisfy you at all times. Be intoxicated at all times by her love. Sorry, you thought the Bible was rated G. It's not. Young people, you thought the Bible was boring. It's not boring. You're just reading the wrong parts. I could read you some things in here. It says, be intoxicated by her love. You've heard that song, Drunken Love? Beyonce read Proverbs. So that's where that came from. I'm moving on, Amy, don't worry. Proverbs chapter 6. Chapter 6 says, go to the ant, to learn how to work. Learn how to work from the ant, because the ant works hard. You keep reading in chapter 6, and it says, a man who does not work hard and is lazy is called a slug. It says, don't be a slug. It says, other words that I like in there, how long will you lie there? It says, you sluggard. Proverbs is fun to read. When are you going to awake from your slumber? A little too much sleep, too much folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come like a thief in the night. Proverbs 6 also says, a man who uses crooked speech and winks too much and continually causes discord amongst people will have calamity fall on him and will be broken beyond healing. Intense words for somebody that likes to sow discord with other people. I don't have time. Chapter 6 also lists a bunch of things that the Lord himself hates. You can go read that on your own. Proverbs chapter 7 gives a strong warning about sexual sin and adultery. I could read you some nuggets from that chapter, but I'm not going to do it yet. Proverbs chapter 8 says the fear of the Lord involves the hatred of evil. That to live with wisdom actually means that you do hate what's wrong. You hate what's blatantly wrong, and you love what's right. That's one of the signs of wisdom. Chapter 9 talks about this tension between these two things, wisdom and folly. And it actually portrays wisdom as this wonderful female teacher who's just wanting to pour wisdom into you and raise you up to be a wise person at any time that you ask for it. It also says, stop trying, this is interesting to me, stop trying to correct, teach, and instruct people who make fun of your faith and morals. Have you read that one? So many Christians constantly trying to defend, argue when people are making fun of them for their Christianity. This proverb actually talks about those who jeer at your faith and your religion. It says, don't even reprimand them. Don't even go there because they don't have wisdom. But if you give instruction to a wise person, It says, even if you correct a wise person, they will love you for it because they're wise. So if you love correction from others in love, that means you're actually a wise person. Chapter 10 says, the blessings of the Lord make rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. And then he goes on to say, if you have parents and you grow up and leave the home of your parents, one of the biggest gifts and blessings you can give to your parents is to become a wise person. To seek wisdom and become more wise is one of the greatest gifts you can give your parents after you grow up. It says it this way, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is only sorrow to his mother. Ouch. Chapter 11 says, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. Very helpful for a single dude. It also says, pride leads to disgrace, but humility leads to wisdom. So pride will never get you wisdom. It'll only lead to destruction. But humility is what leads to wisdom. Chapter 12 says, an excellent wife is the crown of her husband. But a wife who shames her husband regularly is like rottenness in his bones. And then one of my personal favorites, whoever loves discipline loves wisdom. If you don't like to be disciplined, then you don't want to be wise. It says, he who hates correction, I'm interpreting the word right. He who hates correction is stupid. That's what it says. You shouldn't say stupid in church. It's in the Bible, sir. Proverbs 13 says, a godly man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Whew. Chapter 14 says, where there are no oxen, the stable is clean, but by the strength of an ox, there is an abundant harvest. And that is really helpful for me as a young pastor who just wants to make things happen and just goes for it, because when I see mess around and chaos around and things get dirty sometimes, really what this is saying is that can be a sign that there's much fruit being produced. It's not necessarily a bad thing when things get messy. Those are wise words. Chapter 15 says humility comes before honor. So you want to be a man of honor, you want to be a woman of honor, you can't be unless you're humble first. You first have to seek humility. Chapter 16 says there's a path before every one of us that seems right but leads to destruction. Every single one of us in this room, there is at least one path in front of us that we see, and it's like, that looks so right, I see it as right, I feel like it's right, but that is not the right path in God's eyes, and it will lead to bad things. Every one of us has those paths, and it's important not to choose those. Chapter 17 says a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. It makes me thankful for my friends and brothers. Proverbs 18 says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and receives favor from God himself. Chapter 19 says, houses and wealth can be inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is straight from God. If you have a prudent wife, thank God for her every day. Yeah. Chapter 20 says, wine is a mocker, beer is a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. Don't let them master you. Chapter 21 says, a king's heart in the hand of the Lord is like a water course that he directs. And he directs it wherever he wishes, by the way. And that's so important to understand that God is actually guiding our decisions. He is guiding our paths, and we can trust him with the directions even when we can't see 3 feet in front of us sometimes. We can still trust him. Chapter 22 says, the reward for humility and fear of the Lord is actually riches and honor and life more abundant. 23 says, I love 23. One of the things it says in chapter 23 is we should not speak at all times. That there are actually times where it's much wiser to remain silent. And a wise person does not waste their best words in the presence of a fool whose heart is not with you. Those are from Proverbs chapter 23. 24 says, in a multitude of counselors there's victory. You want victory? Do you seek counsel from multiple people, or do you try to just do it all by yourself in your own strength and your own self-proclaimed wisdom? Those who surround themselves and seek counsel from other wise people are the ones who have the greatest victories. Those are some wise words. Chapter 25 says, don't rush forward to try to put yourself in the presence of great people. It's better to be invited into their presence by them than to be pushed down when you try to seek greatness for yourself. That's a powerful one too. Chapter 26, I love this one. It has like these two really kind of strange, almost comical statements that sound like they're contradicting each other, but they're not. And so I'll tell you what they say. It actually says, don't answer a fool according to his folly. But then right after that, it says, answer a fool according to his folly, otherwise he'll think he's wise when he's not. So those two back to back have helped me gain some wisdom in understanding that there are some times where when somebody's acting like a fool, the right thing is to just not stop them from looking like a fool and let them show. But then there's other times where somebody's acting like a fool and it's the right thing to do to rescue them from looking like a fool. And wisdom is being able to discern the difference between those two things. It's knowing the difference. That's a challenging concept. Chapter 27, we're almost done, has a ton of great nuggets. I love this one. He who blesses his neighbor loudly in the morning is actually a curse. Where's my morning people at? Could you just chill for a little bit longer until we've at least had our coffee? That would be nice. Chapter 28 says, the wicked flee, they run when nobody's even chasing them. But the righteous are as bold as a lion. And what that speaks to is when you have something hidden in the dark, when you have something hidden in secret that you're not revealing to anybody, then even when nobody knows about it and nobody's actually chasing you, you're worried every time they come at you that they're chasing you for that thing or that they found out your secret. But when you have no secrets and everything's just out in the open and you're vulnerable in that way, you don't have anything to hide, it makes you as bold as a lion and you never have to run from anybody. That's wisdom. Chapter 29 says, where there is no vision, the people become discouraged. Chapter 30 says, every word of the Lord proves true. Even if you don't see it as true or think it's true yet, it will eventually to you even prove true. And then Proverbs 31 is all about my wife. It's got to get my points. Proverbs 31 is this beautiful display of what a godly, righteous woman looks like. And it says she clothes herself with dignity. She makes her arms strong. She laughs at the days to come. And I love the little part at the end of the proverb too, where it basically calls husbands and sons to elevate the women in their life to a place of honor where they should be. I love that part. There is so much in Proverbs. You see that? That was such a quick tour, and we could have gone off on tangents on any one of those, and there's just so much meat in this book that's so helpful for our life as we navigate things. And so I just want to encourage you. I did not actually spend hardly any time this week going through Proverbs and studying this. These are things that I have been reading for years and trying to absorb for years, repetitively, because I love that practice to do once in a while of read a proverb a day for a month and then another month read a proverb a day, and they just start to permeate your being with these wisdom nuggets, and it starts to affect the way you see things and the way you speak and the way you live, and it's a powerful thing. And so I just want to challenge you tomorrow, if you want to do this kind of plan, read Proverbs chapter 3 in the morning. By the way, it takes you less time than it even takes most of you to go to the bathroom. It's not a long commitment. And this will allow you to get more out of Proverbs, because in each of these 31 chapters, don't miss this again, hear it through the lens, the filter of a loving parent sharing wisdom, passing down this generational wisdom to you as their children. Just see it from that angle. So in the few minutes we have left, I'm going to just breeze through one particular proverb here just to show you kind of how to dissect this and get something out of it. But this is actually Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Here's what it says. Trust in the Lord, you've heard this, with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So let me unpack this piece by piece really quick for you. The first part is you need to trust in the Lord with all your heart. And I know this is a hard one, because the way that I read this sometimes, unintentionally, but it's the same way many of us read it. We read it like, trust in the Lord with most of your heart. Or maybe, trust in the Lord with all of your heart until this thing happens. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart unless this happens. Trust in the Lord with all your heart unless I get this diagnosis. Because there's hard things that get thrown at us. Curveballs. Well, yeah, trust in the Lord with all my heart. Oh, but I just lost my job. No, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. All of your heart means all the chips are in. It means no matter what happens, you're all in. No matter what you walk through, you're all in. No matter how hard it gets, you're all in. You're still going to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. It's a sign of wisdom, and it's hard to get there. What would it look like if we all got there, though? That we trust in the Lord in all circumstances, in all situations, no matter what comes, we still trust him. Whew. It's a powerful thing. The second part says, do not lean on your own understanding. What are you leaning on? What do you lean on when you need more understanding? What do you lean on when you need more wisdom or knowledge? Do you ask the Google? YouTube? If your primary source of truth is YouTube, you're not going to live a life of wisdom. And don't get me wrong, I know how they get us. Because almost any problem I have at the house, I can put it into YouTube and it'll give me a solution, and it always works. But that doesn't mean that it's giving me wisdom. And that doesn't mean it's communicating the truth that leads to wisdom, because those are two different things. God invites us to examine what we're leaning on in our lives, and if it's fueling us with wisdom or if it's giving us something else. And when you begin to lean in on everything he has and his words and his ways, even when they're harder than our ways we'd prefer to do, something happens. Things begin to change inside of us. His wisdom, his ways are always more reliable than anything we could come up with on our own or any other voice that speaks wisdom to us. Every time. And again, I know that many of us have been through this thing that I would call, I don't know, for some of us it might be a crisis of faith, or maybe a speed bump in your journey of leaning into his understanding instead of your own, where you feel like you're leaning into his understanding completely, but then all of a sudden, somebody you deeply love gets sick. You feel like you're leaning into his understanding of everything, but then all of a sudden, something happens with one of your kids, or you lose a job, or whatever it might be, or this thing that you've been hoping for and praying for years literally just crashes. And so now you hit this speed bump, and it's like, oh, I still have to lean into his understanding. I don't get his understanding right now. And so I'm going to give you a practical tool right here that'll help when you kind of hit one of those speed bumps and you're like, what is happening here? There's a couple questions you can ask that are really helpful. The first one is this: when you come up to a speed bump in life, pray this: Father, what do you want me to see in this? What do you want me to see here? I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand why this happened to me or somebody I love, but I'm asking humbly, what do you want me to see in this situation? This is not your prayer of him delivering you from it, which is fine to pray. This is you asking him, no matter how this goes, what do you want me to see? What can you teach me? What do you want me to hear through this situation? And then the second question is, Father, how can I participate with you in this situation? So it doesn't mean that you're not praying for healing, but it means that on top of praying for healing, you're humbly going before God and you're saying, as I pray for this healing, what can I participate in to take part in my healing? Instead of, God, would you just mend this broken relationship in my life? Would you mend this broken relationship in my life? But also, how can I participate with you in mending this broken relationship? Because God doesn't always leave us out of the process of our healing. God doesn't always just do this miracle where he leaves our activity out of him coming and doing the miracle. He calls us to act. He calls us to certain things, even in hard situations, and I would say especially in hard situations. So, Father, would you give me the job, my dream job? How can I participate, though, in the meantime to help get the dream job? It's an important thing to do. Asking questions like that is it's a simple, practical way to lean not into your own understanding. And then the last part of the verse says, in all your ways acknowledge him. So there's some extreme words there. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. In all your ways acknowledge him. And I love that, because what that means is Jesus wants to participate in every area of your life. I don't know if you know this, but he cares intimately about every little detail of your life, even when someone else out here doesn't. And he's willing to be involved. Maybe not in the way you think he should or the way you prayed he would, but he's always willing to be involved, no matter what you're walking through. Everything that's going on in your world, he cares about it. And so I just want to throw this out there. If we invite God into every detail of our life, no matter what's happening, it doesn't mean you're always going to get the exact, perfect, direct guidance straight from his mouth every time. It doesn't mean that. But even if you don't get that, by doing that and inviting him into every detail of your life, you're still way closer to him than you were before. You still have a more intimate walk with him than you did before. You're still closer to victory than you were before. In all your ways, acknowledge him. So look to him for how to think about everything. Look to him for how to deal with your marriage. Look to him for how to raise your kids. Look to him for how to do your job a certain way. No matter what, put him first in every area. And then out of those three things that we just walked through, here's the outcome. He will make straight your paths. Do those three things, and then he will make straight your paths. There's some wisdom for you. Is he not making your path straight? Maybe you haven't done those three things. Make straight your paths. If we look at the original word for that word, straight here, it actually is a lot more meaningful than just saying straight. It means a straight path that's not crooked. It means a level ground to walk on. It means the path is no longer hidden, but you can see the road ahead. So you imagine yourself out in the wilderness and you're hiking on a trail and the trail is really crooked or it's covered in snow and you can't see where to go. But then all of a sudden the snow melts, you see the trail signs ahead and you can see the straight path. That's the result, he's saying, if you do this first. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. The worship team is going to come back up, and we're going to sing one last song before we end today. But let me issue you a challenge. Just like I kind of shared a little wisdom nugget from all 31 Proverbs with you, I'm going to share a little tool that I use to be able to do that I learned many years ago that I've never shared with you probably before. So whether it's the Book of Proverbs or whether you want to take the Book of Mark and you want to get a holistic picture of the entire book where you understand the theme of that whole book, you don't necessarily have to read the whole book and remember every line of it. What you can do is in every chapter of that book, whatever book you choose in the Bible, every chapter you pick one concept, one idea, one important thing that jumps out at you, and you remember that. So if you do that, for example, with the Gospel of Mark, you're going to have 16 ideas that you've remembered from the Gospel of Mark that give you that holistic picture of that whole gospel. You want to understand the Gospel of John or the Gospel of Luke, or you want to pick James, which has practical wisdom for your life. You only got to remember 5 things, one from each chapter in the book of James. It's a way to commit to your memory and gain some wisdom from a whole book of the Bible in kind of a tactical way. And so I challenge you to do that. I'm going to share a personal thing, and then we're going to close, but over the years, as a pastor, I think I've been a pastor for about 18 years now. And I have watched pastors, some that I don't know from a distance, some that I knew very well. I have watched them quit. I've watched them throw in the towel. I've watched them fall out of their calling, fall out of their ministry in different ways. I've watched so many pastors struggle and not even know they were struggling. I've watched them excel at all the church stuff, but everything's falling apart at home, which really means they weren't excelling at the church stuff, but they didn't know it. And then I've also walked with quite a few pastors who have finished the race. And in their older years, they're the kind of people that you just want to sit with and buy them a coffee and just listen and get the wisdom from them. And the critical difference, there's a few, but one of the critical differences I've noticed between those who fall away and those who stick with it and see fruit produced in their life and in their ministry. And this is my personal example from my calling and my life. You can apply this to whatever you're going through in your life. It's the same principle. The key difference is that they were all wisdom seekers. They didn't make their conversations and their relationships and their lives all about themselves. Because anytime they sat with somebody who had wisdom, they tried to draw it out. They tried to pull it out of that person. And so they ask questions, good questions. And they say, can I just get 30 minutes with you on Wednesday? You don't have to bring an agenda. I have it right here. I just want to learn from you. I want you to rub off on me. I've always been really hungry for wisdom. And I make a lot of mistakes and I don't get it all right, but one thing that I'm constantly starving for is wisdom. And I love to humbly seek it. I actually enjoy that process of just putting myself aside, sitting across from somebody and trying to take their wisdom. And so I ask questions like, what's one of the biggest mistakes that you made as a pastor in your career? What's one of the things that you wish you could have known 20 years ago that you just learned? How did you make sure that your marriage stays one of the strongest things in your life at the same time as going through the pulls and the pressures of being a pastor? How did you raise your kids to be passionate followers of Jesus Christ who love the church instead of hating it because you gave more to it than you gave to them? These are the things I want to know. These are the things I want to pull out of people that have done it before me, that have done it better than me. We have to be better at being wisdom seekers. And like a lot of things we've talked about over the last few months, it starts with humility. It starts with putting yourself aside and just acknowledging that I need their wisdom. I don't have it all yet. I don't know it all. I never will. Would you guys stand with me? Prayer team members, if you want to make your way down to the front, they'll be available for you during this last song if you need prayer for any reason. Let me just pray and kind of speak a word of blessing over you guys. Jesus, you are the one who said, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, then ask whatever it is that you want, whatever it is you desire, and it'll be granted. May we be a people who abide in you, who remain in you, who live our lives in you. In your word, in your ways, in your will, in your presence. And may that change us from the inside out. Look up here for a minute. I want to do something a little different today, and I just want you to think, in your mind, just think, what is one thing that God could do for you this week that would be a huge deal for you? Just think about that. What is one prayer that if God could answer it, it would change a lot? Just think about what that is. And then, in faith, lay that at his feet. Father, we lay these things before you with humble hearts, acknowledging that you don't always answer prayers the way that we want them answered, but you always answer. You don't always just swoop in and pluck us out of a situation we'd rather not be in, but you do walk through that situation with us and show us things and teach us things and make us stronger when we come out the other side. Sometimes you're in the process of giving us great gifts that we don't even get to know about for 10 more years. But then we look back and see all that you've done. So we lay these requests, we lay these needs, these desires at your feet, and we just ask in faith that you would meet us right where we are. God, would you meet your people right where they are? Would you participate and intervene in their situations? May your will be done as we follow your ways and we abide in you.